We're going to ask everyone to please take your seats and silence your phones for us, please, or place them on vibrate. Good evening. Okay, blue and white, we can do better than that. Good evening. All righty. I'm Brother Dr. Philip Flap Cockrell, International Executive Director for Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. It is my honor to greet each of you here in this space and those of you viewing tonight's forum via live stream. Thank you for joining Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated and Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated for Real Talk, the community-based counteroffensive to Project 2025. It gives me great pleasure to introduce one of today's phenomenal leaders, who just yesterday was selected as the new chairwoman of the National Panelist Council of Presidents. Please welcome our soror, Dr. Stacy N.C. Grant, International President and CEO of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, who will officially welcome us to this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Flap. We appreciate you, and thank you for that very warm welcome. And greetings to everyone. I start everything with giving God praise. So this is the day the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. I know everyone has different faith traditions, but I am unapologetic about the fact that had it not been for the goodness of God, we would not be sitting in this room tonight talking about Real Talk, the community-based counteroffensive to Project 2025. I am thrilled to be standing here in partnership with my brother president, the Honorable David Turner, and the immediate past president, the Honorable Chris V. Ray, as well as our first vice president of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Gina Merritt Epps Esquire, and our second vice president, Kayla Clark. Could they both stand? And our regional director from the second to none Southeastern region, Vicki L. Pearson, members of our international board of directors. And might I add, also yesterday, as I was introduced as the new chair of the Council of Presidents, we also have a new chair of the Collegiate NPHC Council of Presidents, our second vice president, Kayla Clark. So congratulations again to you. So to my sorors and brothers, this time is a crossroads in the history of these United States. Our democracy is in a fragile state, and tonight is an opportunity for us to really not be reactive, but proactive in how we discuss the issues at hand with members of our organization who serve in Congress and who battle each day to speak up and speak out for those who are marginalized and disenfranchised. And tonight we will be empowered through a discussion that will give us tools, will give us action items, so when we leave this place, we know how we collectively stand in the seat of the movement that our founders intended when Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated and Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated are the only constitutionally bound organizations, I'll say that again, the only constitutionally bound organizations that understand the power of the family unit, working together to acknowledge how we transform the communities we serve through our service. My sorors and my brothers, the community is in need of hope. People are disenfranchised, they're worried, they're scared, they're nervous, because we never thought we would see what we're seeing in 2025 happening after all the gains that our foremothers and our forefathers put forth. So I am proud of the work that we are doing, real work, the action that Finer Women take, and the work that the brothers of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated continue to do. So as we embrace the extraordinary power of she, advocating for social justice, health justice, and economic justice, we stand boldly and proudly alongside our brothers in this work to ensure that our communities are protected, that they're informed, and that they can trust that we are the credible messengers that will bring us out of these challenging moments. Trouble don't last always, and we have seen hard before. Resilience runs in our veins, and the darkest hour is sometimes right before dawn. So as we work on solutions and we work on the ways in which our example will lead us out of these very uncertain times, I'm excited to bring forward to you two people who will now bring us their skill set as the MCs for this evening's program, two of our leaders who carry forth the social justice work that we do. From Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, the International Co-Director for Social Action, Cheryl Pemberton Graves, and Brother Dr. Eric Farmer, the International Director of Social Action Programs of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Let's give them a round of applause.
Good evening. So Project 2025, the conservative policy blueprint created by the Heritage Foundation and allied groups, presents several dangers for the communities we serve. One of the central risks lies in the approach to civil rights enforcement. The plan emphasizes dismantling federal agencies and programs that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, which weaken protections against racial discrimination in employment, housing, and education. African Americans who have historically relied on federal safeguards to address systemic inequities will find themselves with fewer tools to challenge discriminatory practices when such measures are eliminated. Another danger comes from Project 2025's stance on social programs and economic policy. Many of its proposals aim to dramatically, reduce the size of government, including cuts to welfare, healthcare, and housing assistance. African American communities face high poverty rates due to structural disparities, would be hit especially hard by the rollback of these programs. Without adequate access to affordable healthcare, job training, and social safety nets, the economic gap between African Americans and white Americans could widen further, which would make these disadvantages even worse. This plan approach to education raises concerns. Project 2025 calls for reducing federal involvement in public schools, eliminating programs that provide inclusive curricula, and prioritizes charter and private schools. Such policies intensify existing inequities in public education for underfunded majority Black school districts. The rejection of curricula that addresses systemic racism and Black history also erases critical narratives that empower African American students to foster a broader cultural understanding. Finally, Project 2025's criminal justice and policing framework can intensify dangers for Black communities. The plan signals support for law and order approaches that prioritize stricter policing and harsher sentencing while rejecting reforms aimed at addressing racial biases in the justice system. Given that African Americans are already unreasonably targeted by policing and incarceration, a rollback of reform efforts could lead to increased criminalization and surveillance in Black neighborhoods. Instead of addressing root causes of crime, such as poverty and lack of opportunity, the plan emphasizes on punitive measures risks, deepening systemic injustices.
So these are just a few areas how Project 2025 impact the communities we serve. To address this evening's absolutely critical conversation, to engage in tonight's real talk, we have a panel who's ready to peel back the layers and present to us a community defense blueprint. First, we have the Honorable Brother David A. Turner, the International President of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Recently elected to the organization's helm, Brother Turner is a results-driven leader with a stellar record of fraternal service on all levels of the organization. He brings a forward-thinking plan centered on strategic execution, financial diversification, operation excellence, and technological advancement. He contributes to Phi Beta Sigma's span over a decade of transformative leadership, including service as International First Vice President, Vice Chair of Sigma PAC 1914, and Chair of the Phi Beta Sigma Impact Foundation. Beyond Sigma, Brother Turner is an accomplished Chief Financial Officer in real estate development and property management. His extensive career includes executive roles in international finance, adjunct accounting, instruction, and public policy service through state advisory committees in Illinois and California. Next, Sarah Sidney Kamlager Dove, U.S. Representative, Democrat, the 37th District of California. Congresswoman Kamlager Dove proudly represents California's vibrant, diverse 37th Congressional District in Los Angeles County. She is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where she serves as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on South and Central Asia and the House Committee on the Judiciary. She is the whip of the Congressional Black Caucus, co-chair of the Congressional Brazil Caucus, and policy co-chair of the Democratic Women's Club. Prior to her time in Congress, Kamlager Dove spent her career advocating for communities and families. Upon graduation from the University of Southern California, she worked to advance job creation and public arts programs with Rebuild LA and the Los Angeles Festival, two nonprofits dedicated to uplifting communities in Los Angeles. In addition to her advocacy work, she brings to Congress nearly a decade of experience serving the people of Los Angeles in local office and the state legislature. She lives in the district with her husband, stepchildren, and a rescue cat. Next, Brother Maxwell Alejandro Frost, U.S. Representative, Democrat, 10th District, Florida. The first member of Gen Z to be elected to Congress, Maxwell Alejandro Frost is proud to represent the people of Central Florida in the United States House of Representatives. As a former organizer, musician, and community activist, Frost was inspired to get to work at 15 years old after the tragic mass shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary claimed the lives of 26 innocent people. From that moment on, Frost dedicated his life to fighting against gun violence and empowering communities across Florida and the U.S. to get behind gun reform. Frost serves on the powerful Committee on Oversight and Accountability and the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. In Congress, Frost is committed to representing the people of his hometown in Orlando and Central Florida and being their voice in Washington, D.C. Frost is laser-focused on working to deliver change and results on issues of housing affordability, healthcare, abortion rights, LGBTQ reform, voting rights, transportation, justice reform, climate change, and more. Next, Sarah Andrea Huntley, Indiana State Senator and Assistant Minority Leader. A lifelong Hoosier, Senator Andrea Huntley moved to Indianapolis after graduating from Indiana University to pursue her first teaching job. She taught English on Indy West Side in one of the largest high schools in the state. She then went on to serve 10 years as principal of an award-winning K-8 Indianapolis public school. Senator Huntley earned a master's degree in language education and a bachelor's degree in secondary education from Indiana University. She holds a PK-12 school administrator's license and license to teach middle and high school English, and a license to teach English as a new language. Senator Huntley has experienced the joys and challenges of small business ownership and the importance of the creative economy with her husband of 15 years, Ryan, who is the owner art director of Second Street Creative. Brother N. Scott Phillips, Delegate, 10th Legislative District, the state of Maryland. Brother N. Scott Phillips is a distinguished attorney, entrepreneur, and public servant who proudly represents Maryland's 10th Legislative District in the House of Delegates. Since his election in 2022, Phillips has been a steadfast advocate for justice, equity, and economic opportunity. He serves on the Judiciary Committee and actively participates in the Legislative Black Caucus, Veterans Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, and the Transportation Caucus. His legislative portfolio reflects his deep commitment to public safety, second chances, and good governance, supporting measures like the Second Look Act, juvenile justice reform, expungement reform, parole modernization, and procurement equity. Beyond his legislative duties, Phillips is a powerful force in Maryland's business and manufacturing communities. He directs a federally funded advanced manufacturing technical assistance center, helping minority-owned firms grow through access to capital, contracts, and markets. As the founder of the MI Hub Cooperative, a first-of-its-kind manufacturing cooperative for minority entrepreneurs, he continues to drive innovation and inclusive economic development across the region. Crystal Spain, Chair of South Carolina's Democratic Party. Crystal Spain is the first Black woman to chair the South Carolina Democratic Party. She is a Columbia College graduate. She got involved with the state party as a volunteer in 2012, working her way up to executive director. She has extensive campaign experience working at the senior level for presidential campaigns for Senator Bernie Sanders in 2016 and Senator Cory Booker in 2020. She then ran the SCDP coordinated campaign for the 2020 historic U.S. senatorial race for Jamie Harrison. Crystal works as the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee during the historic 2022 midterms elections as the senior advisor of Black engagement, and moderating this event's conversation today is Sora Crystal Jones, the International Director of Programs for Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Incorporated. Crystal Jones has committed her life to public service, developing leaders, and changing lives. In 2006, she founded the Virginia Leadership Institute, now known as Vote, Lead, Impact, to increase the number of Black elected officials through training, mentoring, networking, and tracking. Professionally, Krista has represented 2 associations as a lobbyist, advocating for women's and socioeconomic status issues, and served as the Director of Outreach for 2 members of Congress. Krista is the immediate past president of the National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia and a co-convener for the Black Women's Roundtable in Virginia. In 2024, she was named the National Institute on Lobbying and Ethics top lobbyist. In 2023, Krista was named an Arlington County Commission on the Status of Women, Woman of Vision, and has previously been featured in Ebony Magazine as a hero next door. She is a TEDx speaker and a graduate of the Sorensen Institute of Political Leadership, Leadership Arlington, and the Campaign School at Yale. She is the author of the children's civic education book, Ella Goes to City Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause and welcome our esteemed group of panelists and moderators.
Testing, testing, testing. Well, good evening, everyone. We are so excited to be here to have a real talk conversation about a counteroffensive to Project 2025. But before we get started, we are going to need some audience participation today. We know that we are all very dignified. We're at the Congressional Black Caucus. We're all here dressed up. But we can't talk about a counteroffensive without talking about fighting. So when I say when something is under attack, you are going to respond and say, stand up, fight back. So for example, if I say, if diversity is under attack, what do? You all say,
stand up, fight back.
If equity is under attack, what do?
Stand up, fight back.
Excellent. So I live in Virginia, and as everyone probably knows, Virginia and New Jersey are the only 2 states this year which have gubernatorial elections. I conducted a focus group a few days ago with people who were Virginians, who said that they did not plan on voting. And so I really wanted to get at what messaging my organization could use to reach out to them. And at the heart of what they were really talking about was they didn't feel like they had power. They felt powerless. They didn't really feel like their vote mattered. So before we get started with the conversation, I just want to talk about a few different types of power, because as we talk about fighting back against Project 2025, we need to make sure our communities feel empowered. So there is electoral power, which is the ability to elect officials that represent our community. There's negotiating power, the ability to negotiate with elected officials that you have elected to move them closer to your position. Accountability or protest power, the ability to hold elected officials accountable while they're in office through participation. And punitive power, the ability to collectively fire elected officials that do not satisfy the expectations of the job they are elected to do. So as we talk about Project 2025, many people have heard of Project 2025, but they may not know its concrete implications. What is the most urgent risk communities need to understand right now, and how does it show up locally? Just whoever would like to answer.
I mean, I think the thing that I would say is that, where you going, Congresswoman? I'm sorry.
I'm going to let you go.
The thing I would say is that it is not some distant thing. It's not abstract. It's happening right now. It's happening at the federal level. It's happening at the state level. It's happening at the very, very local level. And that would be the most urgent message I would want to say, is that it's happening now. It's no longer a plan. It is being implemented, and we are fighting every day from Congress to the State House to try and stop it. And it is an attack on freedom and democracy. And I think that might have sounded like something that was an abstract phrase last year, but I think now everybody understands what their freedoms are and what democracy is.
So, two things. I know you said one. Well, I think one of the single biggest impacts it's having is the loss of our autonomy. Black people oftentimes are questioning the democracy and the justice, in this country. But at the heart of what happens at the local levels and even at the state levels is you still have some degree of autonomy where you're making decisions about where you want to live, or where you're going to work, or what's going to happen in your child's school. And the fact that Project 2025 and this administration are working to take away your ability to make decisions for yourself by shutting down access to money, access to services, access to opportunity, and access to holding folks accountable. And I think most people, at the very least, regardless of your political party affiliation, is that you want to be able to make your own decisions, and you want those decisions to be implemented. The consequence of all of this is it's overwhelming everyone and making you feel like you don't matter. Mm-hmm. And that feeds into feeling like voting doesn't matter. So we have to re-engage people's hope by also making sure that folks want to continue to fight for their autonomy.
If I could, I'm going to describe it this way. It is the intentional dismantling of democracy as we know it. I think that's the biggest threat that we have, whether it's redistricting in the middle of a cycle in Texas, or it is the ignoring of court decisions, or it is looking at allocations that have come from Congress that are just being ignored, and activities from this executive branch not fulfilling funding that has already been allocated. It is the dismantling of democracy as we know it. That's how I would describe it.
And with that, when we say these big things like the dismantling of democracy, this taking of power, what it's looking like in our day-to-day lives that I would say is one of the biggest issues is this destruction of data. And when we think about the data that we keep and being able to come to agreement on what information is out there is important for all decision making. Give you an example. We no longer are collecting data about hunger. Well, I know I got hungry babies in my community. I'm sure that you do too. We've got hungry elderly folks, and we know that our elderly are actually suffering more from food insecurity than other portions of the population. But if we're not collecting the data, then we're not having the conversation with real numbers, and then we're not making decisions to then support it, right? So that taking away of the data is another piece. And that is true for women's health care, We're no longer looking at data, and so that means that we're going to, the next thing that'll follow will be decisions and money about who is getting support, who has hospitals in their area, who has clinics in their area, right? We know that that's, will be the next logical step from there. But that's also where we can all come in and start collectively working to keep our own data. And I know that there are a lot of organizations that are working to do that.
We live in a country that has a rigged economy. We live in a country where over 60% of our people cannot afford an unexpected $400 bill today. We live in a country that has massive wealth inequality, where the economy is stacked, so the top billionaires and mega corporations make most of the money no matter how the economy is growing. And what Project 2025 seeks to do is to rig our democracy as well and rig the way our institutions work. A lot of Project 2025 are just the normal conservative policy points that we've all heard for a long time. But the thing that makes Project 2025 very different from any other campaign promise is it is a plan to put a permanent, very far right-wing extreme stamp on our government, so that way it almost doesn't matter who you vote into office. And that's why they are doing the things they're doing. And it's always interesting, right-wing politicians and governments have a little bit of an easier task than a lot of us do. It's easy to destroy things. It's easy to run on a platform of destroying things and minimizing things. It's hard to get everybody health care in the country. And Project 2025 is that plan and that blueprint to put that permanent stamp on this nation through our courts, through the judicial system, through the way our elections run and the way our elections move. I mean, it should not be allowed for one person to put $20 million in a congressional race. 98% of the people who get elected to Congress got there. 98% of the people who win the race for Congress had the most money spent on their behalf or that they raised themselves. Right? So it's looking to continue to rig our democracy, rig our economy, to work for a very specific group of people. And it's not people that look like us.
When democracy is under attack, what do?
Stand up.
Excellent. So what are some successful examples of states or cities who have pushed back on some of these federal rollouts?
I can answer this. I actually have, I always say Project 2025 is Florida 2020. The things everyone is surprised about, we've been dealing really in the South for a long time. But also my state of Florida. I have a state attorney who was removed from office by Governor Ron DeSantis because he disagrees with her politics. Right? We have another state attorney who was removed from office a few years before that for the same reason. I have a county commission that was pressured to sign an agreement with ICE because the Attorney General of Florida came out and said, if you don't sign this, we are removing you from office. And the way the charter is written is, guess who's going to pick your replacement? Governor Ron DeSantis. All written in the way our institutions work to benefit those in power and give no recourse to the people. And that's why I talk about my state a lot in this, because a lot of people come to me, why don't you guys do what they did in Texas with the redistricting? Well, Project 2025 happened in Florida already. We can't. The mechanism doesn't exist. To deny them a quorum, you need an insane 50% to not be there of the whole institution. And we're in a super minority. And they're looking to continue to make these changes. But here, I have a really good example, though, that hopefully can give people some hope. You've all heard of alligator Alcatraz, right? Boo. Look, DeSantis is trying to run for president. Trump hates him. He's trying to figure out ways he can be relevant as much as possible. That's literally what a lot of this cruelty is about. But we hear about this, I call it the Everglades internment camp, but alligator Alcatraz. We hear this is a thing. A lot of us worked with organizations to figure out and strategize how can we work together with the power we do have to shut this shit down. Because we do not believe, number one, that any human's illegal. We do not believe that 32 people should be stuffed in a cage. And we do not believe this should be in the Everglades, destroying our environment. And we asked those 3 questions of groups of advocates, of politicians across the state. What does the coalition look like? 3 groups, the Miccosukee Tribe, the Center for Biological Diversity, and Friends of the Everglades, came together and filed a lawsuit on the basis of it destroying our environment. A group of politicians, myself and a few others, said, what's some power we do have, right? Because when you don't have all the power that you want, you best use all the power that you got. And as a member of Congress, we can enter these facilities, or we're supposed to. So a group of us went in to Alligator Alcatraz. But before we went in, we got with the plaintiffs of these lawsuits. We got with the organizers and asked, what do you need to know to help you? If you could walk in there, what information would you need? I went in with a binder this thick, full of questions, straight from the people in the lawsuit. We went inside, and I answered, and not just me, we answered all of those questions. Some of us served as witnesses in the lawsuit. I went a second time and then filed a declaration in the lawsuit, and then we got the decision that you have to shut the place down. And this is gonna go back and forth in court for a while, but I can tell you, right now, there's no one there. Because, not because of one person, not because of one entity or one organization, but because we all have to put our egos aside and said, what can we do? What power do we have? And how can we help each other? Not for a headline, but for an impact.
So I'd like to give the anecdote, because I live in a supermajority state called California, and we were minding our own business until Texas went cray-cray. And so we stepped in and said, how are we going to neutralize the fact that Governor Abbott accepted a phone call from the White House and then went into a back room and redrew some lines without any input from anybody in order to give him 5 extra seats. And California said, we're going to come to the table, we're going to put it to the voters, however, and ask them if they would be willing to redraw the maps of our state so that there's the possibility of 5 different kinds of seats in play to neutralize what Texas is doing. Once again, an example of folks coming together, because you know, everyone likes to win with these massive numbers. You know, I won with 60% or 70% of the district. And in redrawing these maps potentially, because they're on the ballot in November, and we don't know if it will be successful, although I support it, but members had to be okay with winning with a smaller margin, because you're shifting populations in order to make seats more competitive, in order to, you know, hopefully have more Democrats in the state than Republicans. So that was an example of us saying, well, how can we use our collective strength to actually not just help the state of California, but also the rest of the country? One of the reasons why we're in the minority in Congress right now is because we are down 3 seats. Well, in North Carolina, they did some messy redistricting so that the majority party could gain 3 seats. If that redistricting chaos hadn't happened, we would probably be in the majority right now. But California is also the state that said during, Trump 1.0, we're going to protect immigrants. We're going to have sanctuary cities here. Why? California is the 4th largest economy in the world, and we also have the largest number of immigrants in the entire country. And we know that those data points do correlate. So we're going to protect our community because we're trying to not just protect our immigrant community, but we want to protect our economy and our businesses and our families. California was the one who said, ICE, you've got to go, and we're going to take all of y'all to court and get out. And while there was a lot of huffery and puffery coming from the White House, ICE eventually left. We know that that was a sideshow because he was exacting economic violence on the community with H.R. 1. California's also stepped in and said, well, we care about the environment. And even though the administration is doing crazy things with rolling back protections, because they don't care if our water is dirty and if our air is dirty, we're going to step in and say, we want things to be clean. We want, the land to be safe. And we want to serve as a model, not just for other states, but other countries as well. So I share it as the anecdote to crazy Florida, to show that there are ways that we can.
We're not all crazy.
You're not all crazy. You're not crazy, Maxwell. But your governor is an odd duck. He's an odd duck. But just to show that there are ways that we can use our power to help one another, yes, in ways that will benefit all of us.
And you have to recognize that where the power exists and then use it.
And you have to give up a little power
Exactly.
in order to gain more.
Exactly.
And I'll add something too from a southern state where we also suffer under a Republican supermajority, where the victory for us looks different. Earlier this year when they started with the DEI bans, the federal DEI bans, as goes DC now, South Carolina will soon follow. Our Democratic caucus is organized to use every tool in their toolkit, which they don't have numbers to, fight back, but they've got procedural roadblocks they can put up. They can delay it. So the DEI ban, they worked for a month to delay it by, getting on the floor and saying these things and just causing all these setbacks where they had to initially rewrite it 3 times. So the one that finally passed was not the initial legislation, so it was more watered down. So that's a victory for us. Right now it's in the Senate. We'll see if they have the appetite. But those are examples for states like South Carolina where we don't have the numbers to just kill it, how we use every tool we can to try to, save our communities from total abandon.
Absolutely.
So I'm the lucky guy in this room. In Maryland, I will say this: elections matter. And so in Maryland, we have an Attorney General, Anthony Brown, African American, who understands his assignment. And on every occasion that he's been able to, he's fought back using the power of the AG's office, whether it's immigration, it's minority business, so we're fighting back. There are 21 states that have joined the coalition of AGs, primarily democratically operated states. And so that is one tool that we've used. Now, I will tell you that's a challenge because, this Project 2025 is real. There is a entity out of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Institute of Liberty and Law and Liberty. And they have been really the organization that has gone after everything, whether it's Harvard, MBDA, Minority Business Development Agent, SBA, and they are also galvanized to go after even these AGs that have come together to push back. But the courts are one way that we have to push back. I think we have to begin to look at those legal resources in states like Florida and Texas. We're going to have to stand up our own because those AGs are not going to be on our side, right? So we're going to have to figure out, I think, how to leverage the Legal Defense Fund, leverage some of the other organizations that are out there so we have our counter to the Wisconsin Institute. So I do think that's important. As a lawyer, I think that's important. But the other way I think that we can really fight back is organizationally. I think we've really got to do a better job with the African American organizations, the Latino, Latinx organizations coming together to coalesce around these issues as well.
Absolutely.
I'll say that in Indiana, we are not fighting back. They're rolling over. It is frustrating and hard, but when the call came out for states to control women's bodies by banning abortion, Indiana went into a special session and was the first state to do it. When the call comes in about redistricting and redrawing the maps in the middle, we watched what Texas did, and the folks in Indiana said, we're going to be next. We're going to do it. And so now we are in this middle ground right now where they actually don't have the votes to do the redistricting and get Trump the 2 seats that he would like from Indiana in the House. However, they're just twisting arms over the course of the past 6 weeks, and people are slowly being bought out, right? Their votes are slowly being turned, and the state has been threatened but with them withholding all federal funds from our state. That's what the White House has said that they're going to do. Well, that's a problem. Indiana gets the third most money in the entire country, of any state. The third highest amount of money from federal funds comes into our state. And so this is a real challenge, right? How do you stand up? How do you fight back when it's going to have these types of sweeping consequences? But we have seen some hope. One of my favorite posts that I saw was from the NAACP, where they just said, we're suing everybody. I thought, yes, that's where we need to be. And so we know that it's not going to come from our Attorney General, but it's going to come from partners like, we have a really strong NAACP, and also the ACLU. And so right now, our American Civil Liberties Union is suing one of our state institutions, Ball State University, I'm going to call them out, because they fired an employee for a social media post that she made last week. And, you know, is this a freedom of speech issue? Does she have a right to be an employee? Well, the ACLU is standing up because what our Attorney General did is posted on social media a link and says, report any teacher here. Report any professor here, so that they can go after them, right? They can attack them. And so we, as community folks, have to stand up and say, okay, no, we're not gonna attack our teachers. We have a teacher shortage, and if you try, we're gonna sue you. And so that's part of the resistance there, is the community coming together to be that support.
Excellent. Did everyone answer that? Okay. So, you know, can you all talk a little bit more about some of the legal challenges that are underway against Project 2025 aligned policies? And we've already talked about how the community can kind of support those cases, but is anyone able to kind of list some cases and some current things that are going through litigation in terms of Project 2025?
Well, there have been a number, right? The attacks on MBE, DBE programs is real. The challenge with the SBA fortunately responded under the Biden administration, before this administration came in, on some of the rules governing how you qualify or certify to be a small business. So that was fortunate, right? But there's still additional attacks. In Maryland, as a matter of fact, there was recently a letter written from DOT to our governor concerning our MBE program, which is applying to the Francis Scott Key Bridge and the rebuild of the bridge. You know, in Maryland, we're going to push back, right? We actually provided additional resources to the Attorney General's office so that he can fund or get outside counsel to push back. But once again, we're very, very fortunate. We're probably unique right now in the United States. But for me, I think that's important for the rest of the United States, that we push back on some of those things. You mentioned reproductive rights. What Maryland did was we put it on the ballot, actually, to change our Constitution to ensure reproductive rights. And that passed, right, in preparation of potential for Trump, too. So we did a lot of things proactively. We actually did some things to protect the Affordable Care Act proactively, right? Because we knew that the attack was going to come. Now, it comes at a cost. We just sent a letter to those individuals who did not have insurance through their employers. In Maryland, you know, we try to make sure that individuals have an opportunity, and we actually provide a little additional money to support them if they have to go through the ACA. We just sent a note saying that their premiums are going to increase by 12 to 13% because of the cuts at the federal level in funding for Medicare. Right? So this is a challenge, right? So how do we do that? So people are going to be upset probably with the Democrats because we're saying you got to have this insurance, and oh, by the way, we're going to increase it. So the messaging piece in all of this is becoming really difficult, right? We're trying to do the right thing, and at the same time, some of this is being held against us.
But it's great because I think we're hearing a lot more that people just want someone to stand up. Yeah. Anybody, just stand up, say something, fight back.
Yeah, I was going to say that the lawsuits and the judicial side of this is really important. A lot of people don't realize that about 45% of all this man's executive orders and actions have been stopped, paused, or reversed for two main reasons. Number one, because of a lawsuit or because of the courts, and number two, because of people power. which is something we haven't discussed as much, but is really important. Because we have this conversation all the time. What if he defies this and that and this and that? And the answer to some of these questions is going to be the people rising up, taking to the streets, denying our wallets, denying our work. And it's really important that we, can keep that in mind. All these protests that happen, all these mobilizations are important because it helps us build power and build capacity for the future fights we don't even know about yet. I talked about Alligator Alcatraz, but there's a lot of other cases like that across the entire country, even just in the state of Florida as well. But I think it's a really good example because if I were to say, we're going to do a lawsuit on this internment camp in the middle of the Everglades, most people would say, well, let's do it on the basis of human rights, human dignity, right? Which is really important. But there was a strategy here to look at what gives us the best chance to have the biggest impact. And so the case that won had nothing to do with that, sadly. But in a smart way, it had to do with the environment only. The second time I went in there, because we coordinated with the organizations, I was literally on my hands and knees in that place looking at silt fencing and looking and writing down what generators were leaking and things like that to help a very, very specific case. That's why it's important for us to be very creative and think about many of the different ways that we can attack what's going on. But one thing I want to mention I think is really important that you brought up and mentioned too is a big problem with the Democratic Party is we are too timid when it comes to judicial power. And this is something that Republicans have on lock. Whenever there is a Democratic president and we see a lot of their executive orders overturned that have to do with canceling student debt or doing good common sense gun reform and stuff like that, like 90% of the time, where do these lawsuits originate from? Republican state attorneys general across the country who are coordinated, funded, and organized to work together, not just on stuff relating to their state, but to sue the federal government on lawsuits that are going to have national implication. We don't do that to that level, and it shows. And we have to think about this when we're in power as well. I get it. We don't want to be seen, and we should never weaponize the Justice Department. We should never do that. But I'll tell you this, no matter what you do, you're going to get blamed for doing that anyway. Okay? And the fact of the matter, I was a supporter of the last administration, but I got to tell you, I was very disappointed with the Department of Justice, especially being in the South. I can't tell you how many times I was banging on the door, sending letters, begging people, anything to help us in the South, where we were literally having our rights taken away, and the federal government, crickets. Merrick Garland. Okay? It's important that we look, when we're in power again, we have to use every tool we have, not to weaponize it against people politically on what's going on now, but to protect people no matter what state they're in, no matter who's the governor. The Constitution belongs to all of us. We all have those rights. And our federal government has to protect every single one of us, no matter who we're scared of or what they're going to say.
Okay, if I could, to on the congressman's point, recently I watched a viewing of the documentary on Thurgood Marshall, and I would suggest that everybody take a look at this. But to your point, it really galls me that many of the conservative kind of think tanks that are dealing in the courts are using the exact same model that was used by Thurgood Marshall. It's scary. But we're not lost, because we need to go back to that model, right? And we need to bring those cases, even cases that we may lose, right? Because we got to it's the messaging about what's right, what's just, what's appropriate. And I agree with you. We've got to leverage the courts.
How do we deal with fear? So you all are up here, you are leaders, you're managing through, just being an elected official in general, and then definitely through these last 9 months, it's been really challenging on all of us. But I think it's very natural to be afraid of what could happen or what couldn't happen. How do you all manage that?
Yeah, I think I'll start on that one. I've been somewhat intentionally sitting back, really to allow our brothers and sisters who are kind of walking the halls of the state houses and federal houses daily to kind of set the stage and to kind of give just some important background on where we are. I think one of the things that's important for us as an organization is for us to be that intermediary, as Grant always says, that trusted voice in communities. I want to point something out just real quickly right here in the front. We're not here this week just with myself, but we've got a bunch of our collegiates, young leaders that are here with us as well. And so it's important for us, because we got the next Maxwell Frost sitting, sitting here. But it's important for us as Sigmas, as Zetas, as trusted advocates in our communities, one, to be here in Real Talk and to engage with those who have information to share with us, to engage with our elected leaders, and then to go out into the communities that we serve hand in hand every day, and to make sure we're also ringing the bell, sounding the alarm, and really helping our communities focus on the right things. You know, one of the things I heard Scott say, he talked about the AG races. We talk about judicial races. And so for years, we've talked about the focus of not just being the president, vice president, the governor. We've talked about the importance of judicial races. And even though we've talked about it, we really haven't driven the right level of engagement within African American communities. And today we're seeing every single day just how far behind and how detrimental it has been, the fact that we haven't had that focus. But I think, again, in terms of the fear factor, organizations like Phi Beta Sigma, like Zeta Phi Beta, standing up, speaking up, being trusted advisors in our communities are part of that solution that we try to be.
Thank you.
And to speak to your question about how do we deal with fear, for me, it's daily. You know, I have to deal with that every morning, as my grandma was saying, when I put my 2 foot on the ground, I have to remind myself that God did not give me a spirit of fear. You know, this is the job you asked for. I know it's changed a lot, but you got exactly what you asked for, and you got to face it head on. And you can't be afraid, even when the danger is real and it's close, because when the Charlie Kirk stuff happened, you know, there's nobody else to blame in South Carolina but us. So of course, you know, they want to come and get us. But daily, and just know that I have to remind myself that I'm not doing anything that people before me had to do, you know, with very serious, real challenges and with less. So just to answer your question, daily and just leaning in my faith all the time.
And I'll tell you that as a mama, I've got 2 kids at home, two daughters, and having the conversations about safety makes it really real, because I want them to know that we're safe when we are in our home. I don't want to incite fear in them, but the fact of the matter is that in the past 6 months, we've had to install more security cameras at our home. They can't touch the packages that come onto our doorstep, right? We have a protocol for how we open them. We have a protocol for how we open the mail. We have to be careful about where we're going. I never post online that I'm out of town until I get back. Like all of these things that we have to be cognizant of. At the same time, it's also meant that I've recruited a lot more volunteers who now come with me to events. Lots of brothers, lots of Sigmas, thank you to my Sigmas, who come and who say, I'll come with you to that event. Great, I need somebody to come with me, right? I need somebody to be my other eyes in the room, right? Because I'll tell you that in the state of Indiana, I make less money as a senator than I did as a teacher. I can't afford my own security team, right? And so if that's the reality, then we need volunteers, we need the community to come together to take care of us. But fear is also at the bottom of everything we're talking about. When we talk about Project 2025, it's about what are we most afraid of, and then how do we spin it? And the way that things are getting spun are really creative and quite tricky. So I'm gonna give you an example. So one is parental rights, right? They say parental rights. We're going to have legislation that's about parental rights. And you think, oh, that's good. Parents should have rights. Parents should have rights. But what they're doing is they're playing on your fear of what's happening in my kid's school. We have the right to have a camera in every classroom. And you're like, hold up, wait a minute. That sounds like a police state. That sounds really authoritarian, right? Or religious freedom. Well, of course, we all want to have religious freedom, right? But they prey on our fear around, well, what are they teaching? What are they teaching our kids? What type of religious freedom? And so now the religious freedom bills that come out of our states that we're copy and pasting from folks in the South are about teaching into religious freedom in school. So now we have to, in Indiana, we have a law now that says that you have to allow folks, kids, to take an hour out of their school day to go to religious education classes that are put on by a group that I'm not sure believes in the same Jesus that I do. And so, but they call it religious freedom, and they're preying on the fears, right, of those families. And so there are all of these examples of how it's just, fear is such a strong emotion, and it gets people coalesced, it pulls people together. I would say school choice is the same thing, right? That's playing on a fear about what's happening in school. You're taking away choice from parents. It sounds good. But what it looks like is $1 billion being sent to private schools because of vouchers, right? To say that you can choose that type of a program, and then we're defunding our public schools, right? And so we've created all of these systems in Project 2025 that are based on fear, but that are having real consequences at the state level, for sure. And this is where it matters that we come together and help shine light on what's happening, so that when your neighbor says, well, that bill is about parent rights, that's real important. Well, the parent right bill that we passed actually was taking away rights from Department of Child Services. That's a problem. We need to make sure that Department of Child Services has a line of sight on what's happening, and that they have control of some situations, right? And so we need to make sure that we're explaining all of that to our neighbors and to our friends. And I know we'll talk about social media, and that's one way to do it. But I also think that just the power of your own text group. All of you all have that group chat on your phone right now. Like, we don't have to put everything out there on socials for it to be attacked or for it to be scrolled through really fast. But those 3 people, those 4 people that you're closest with, that you talk to 6 times a day, like, those are the folks that you need to be reminding, that you need to be talking to. Because in Indiana, we have 225,000 registered Black voters. Less than 9% actually showed up to the polls in our presidential election. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to be listening over here to South Carolina, figure out what we're going to do to turn people out. But that's the thing, though, is that we've forgotten our collective power. We've forgotten that collective importance. If we had all showed up to vote, we would have a different governor. If we all came up to vote, right? And these things matter. They really do.
So let's talk about the mobilization piece. So you all have some great perspectives from being, elected leaders to former organizers to members of Congress. How do you effectively lead and set up a mobilization plan from the initial idea to reaching impact? So everyone's going to go home really excited after CBC, recognizing the work that needs to be done. What are some of the first things that need to be done in that process?
Okay. Big question. But, one of my favorite quotes about organizing is from Cesar Chavez. And he goes, organizing is very simple. You talk to one person, then another person, then another person. And, I think and for people who don't know, before I ran for Congress, I used to be the national organizing director for a group called March for Our Lives. That came after the shooting that happened in Parkland, Florida. And we did the largest youth mobilization in modern history to end gun violence that many of you probably went to in your hometowns. And, the job of an organizer at the end of the day, when people have a call to action, something happens in their life to them or they see something happen, they have a conversation, something happens. One of 2 things will happen. It could push them to action, but it can actually push them further into apathy. And what organizers do is we stand at that crossroads and we help people find a political home. And finding a political home, I think, is one of the most important things we can do in organizing. Because people come to me all the time. I'm on a national tour where I'm going to red districts and I'm doing town halls with people. And we've had a crazy turnout. But the question I always get is, what can I do? And I can sit up here and I can list you a ton of tactics, right? Making phone calls, sending letters, doing protests, going door to door, registering people to vote, mutual aid, using the arts and culture, all this different stuff. But at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is get involved in a group that can answer the question you just asked me every day in your community. That is the best thing that you can do. And so as we leave CBC, I think that's really important, is thinking about how can we in our community, in our chapter, be able to answer that question for people. Maybe it's not on a daily basis, maybe it's a weekly basis, maybe it's a monthly basis. I don't know, it depends on what people's schedules are. But I used to say one of the most important things I would tell my organizers when I was a field director on campaigns is we would have failed if we did not give people the opportunity to commit to a future thing before they lead the thing that they showed up for. And I think that's so important. It's not enough for somebody to come to one action. And as organizers, our job doesn't end when the person walks through the door and we say, we got 100 people here today, that's great. The real question is, how many people come a second time? How many people come a third time? How many people come a fourth time? And what we have to do is make it as easy as possible for people to make that commitment. Because as organizers, we're not asking people to give us anything. We're giving people an opportunity to be a part of this thing, which is a great honor.
Yeah, I think one of the first things we do is we get and give real information. And so not just headlines, right? And what's really going on behind the scenes. And so before you do leave here today, on the back of the sheets you've got, right, the team has organized and provided a number of resources, right, for tracking real information. What does this really mean to you, to the person I'm talking to? What does it mean in your life? The second thing, I think, is getting the data, right? So as an accountant, right, the numbers, the data really is important. It drives who we need to be talking to, where we need to be going. I live in the Great Lakes region, and I hadn't even tracked that voting statistic for Indiana, which is right across the border from me, from Chicago. And so having that factual information, say, now I've got the information, and now I've got the data that tells me who needs to hear it, who's being impacted by it, and doesn't realize the negative impact on their lives. That's the work that Zeta and Sigma chapters have to do, door to door, community by community, because we are represented, like the 81% or the 91% that didn't vote. There are Sigma and Zeta chapters in all of those communities. And so that's the next step that we've got to take as an organization.
When you talk about like grassroots organizing and mobilizing, the main thing I always tell folks is, like, you have to get involved and you have to show up. You cannot insulate yourself, stop all the text messages, ignore all the phone calls, don't check the mail, and then be surprised when you don't know anything, like you don't know anything's happening, because it's by design, because you've shut off all lines of communications. But one thing we are doing at the South Carolina Democratic Party, we just launched our Democracy Builder program. And Congressman Frost talked about, just tactics and phone banks and, text messaging and all those things. But this program is basically neighbor to neighbor. You sign up, and we're going to give you 35 of your neighbors that you're responsible for talking to at least 3 times before the next election. That's not a lot of people. And it's you talking to people who live around you, who y'all should have some common interest. At least y'all decide to live in the same community. So that's one line, that's one thread. But that's one thing that we're doing that's different from what we've done in the past. But I would encourage all of you individually to be involved in your local Democratic Party, because they should be organizing to affect real electoral change. Like, they want to flip state house seats or city council seats, congressional seats. So being involved is, it's just the crux of it. Like, you've got to show up, and as he said, not just go to one meeting. Like, you should be getting engaged to do other things. Like, I don't want to make phone calls. That's fine. You'll do it next time you come, right? Because you're going to have to do it. Like we've got to get out of this mindset of somebody else gonna do it. You are somebody, you are the person who's gonna have to do it to change your community. That's it. No one is coming to save us. We will probably never get another Barack Obama. There's not going to be some perfect candidate that's going to wake everybody up. We got to wake each other up, and we got to show each other what the work looks like. And it is hard, and it is annoying to cold call folks or knock on their door. Even now it feels dangerous to do so. But if you go through your Democratic Party, they should be giving you doors that shouldn't be completely crazy people behind it. It should be somebody who was in there at some point voting for a Democrat. So I encourage all of y'all to get involved at the county level, at the state level. These folks need your presence. They need your energy. They need your resources. So please go back home and engage your state Democratic Party or your local Democratic Party. I know you can do it individually. You don't have to take the whole organization with you.
Yeah, I was about to give that disclaimer as the president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated.
Individually. Right. The disclaimer, Mr. President.
Have the right information, and then you need to go where right, the resources are and go after those that are prepared to act in your interests and vote your interests. And if you truly are read up and following and understand what your interests are and not just from the headlines, that'll guide you in the right direction.
Can I say something on this really quick? Because, you know, I actually see the nonpartisan aspect of our organizations to actually not be a negative, but be an asset to the work that we need to do. And the reason I say this is we all know that both parties' favorability is very low right now. Now, I'm proud to be a Democrat. I'm a part of the Democratic Party. I'm committed to working to fix that. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of distrust in our system. And we all have different roles to play in getting people to be back involved. People who are saying, I voted my whole life. I feel like the economy is rigged. I feel like the democracy is rigged. What am I doing? And a lot of times it takes different types of voices coming from different places to talk to people about that. And the fact that we come at it from a place saying, we're not here on behalf of any party, we're out here on behalf of our people, and we want to educate you on what's going on and why it's important for you to vote. A lot of times you find that that approach actually bears more fruit because people don't feel like they already know what you're going to tell them before you tell them it. And I think that's important. I think it's important we're all doing this stuff in different spaces. I talk a lot of my groups, and I say, it's good you guys are doing something over there because the party locally, we're focused on this over here. And if we're all doing the same thing, we're going to get the same results. We have to spread out and get this message in many different places. And so I really see it as an asset in this work because we need to really branch out and spread out. And that's something the Republican Party, we brought up Charlie Kirk and Turning Point. I'm gonna really quick. When I was on the road for Kamala, I was in Arizona, and I got pulled into a room full of organizers on the campus. At this point, we're like a week away from the election. I'm feeling really good. I mean, big rallies, everything. It's like the energy is good. They say, Maxwell, we need to come in here and inspire the campus organizers because they feel really depressed. So I walked in, and I was like, why are you guys depressed? We're gonna win. You're doing your thing, yada, yada, yada. And they all look at me and they go, Turning Point. And I'm like, what do you mean? They go, well, while we're here at lunchtime giving out pizza and getting people to commit to vote cards, they're hosting the biggest parties on campus. They're hosting the biggest fun events on campus, not connected to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, but just Turning Point. And they're bringing in people who wouldn't really otherwise go to the Young Republicans Club or the Young Democrats Club. And it's giving them a separate outlet that they hadn't seen before. And I did a lot of research and dug into this, and I really do think it's part of the reason why Donald Trump, not the whole reason, but part of the reason why Donald Trump got 46% of the youth vote. So you understand how crazy this is. The election before, Democrats got 70% of the youth vote. He didn't win it, but he got pretty damn close. And I think a big part of this is us, again, putting our egos aside and saying, people are going to pick different political homes. You know, I hope it's with my campaign, But not everyone is going to be on my campaign. They might be in a different group, but as long as we all coordinate, we're walking together, I think that's important. So,
I think about this, and I'm going to use an acronym more. We've got to kind of figure out a number of different things: media messaging, organizing, this idea of fighting back, resistance, and ultimately education. We have not done well, and I'm just going to specifically talk about the Democratic Party, I'd say in the last 8 years or so, in making sure we had the right message. We really did have on-the-ground organizing, and now this idea of fighting back, we haven't figured out what message we should have to fight back with. Part of that, I think, is because we're being attacked at so many different places, at schools and at work and our jobs and everywhere we're kind of, so it's hard to figure out where we fight back and how we educate. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I think we got to do better in all of our communities, because it's not just about us, it's not just about black people, right? It's about figuring out what is that thing that coalesces a lot of different folks who are now being marginalized. And I don't have that answer, but if we don't figure out how to coalesce, whether it's LGBTQ, Hispanic communities, now Asian communities, African American communities, when you think back in terms of organizing, if you went back to the 60s, we were bringing in the unlikely partners in the fight. We haven't, and Congressman, maybe here in Washington you're doing it better. We've got a coalition in Maryland that seems to be working, but it has not transcended nationally, and I'm really concerned about that.
We only have a few more minutes left. Does anyone have any questions from the audience? There are microphones set up. Yes, I think there are microphones. Is it just one over there, or? Okay.
You go ahead. Go ahead, Sora.
Good evening, Soars and Fred. Thank you guys so much for having this panel. My name is Ryan. I come from the great state of California. Soracom Margaret Dove is actually, I'm one of her constituents, so it's amazing to be here. But so you guys talked a lot about fear and kind of apathy, as well as the decrease in voter turnout, particularly in this last voting cycle. On the other side of that, we seem to see an increase in voter turnout on the other side, right? So you mentioned the statistic about turning point and the 46%. But one of the reasons it seems like that apathy exists is because it seems like there's a lack of tangible and immediate change when people vote in their lives, right? So we oftentimes hear people say, why even vote? Why does it matter? And although what this current dictator and his regimen is doing is harmful, terrifying, and disgusting, in the last 9 months, everything he said he was going to do is being done. So on the other side of that, when we are in office, we don't see that immediate, loud, tangible change. So what are you guys, doing to ensure that when we do have that power, that change is coming, that change is able to be seen immediately?
I think that is, you have hit the nail on the head with what the issue is with the Democratic Party messaging. I mean, absolutely. And I think that it is the reason why people have so much apathy, because we had the opportunity to fix our immigration system and we didn't do it. We had the opportunity to do, all of these things that we could list that we didn't do. But I think that part of the challenge is that when we say those things, we're talking about what's happening at the national level. And so much of what impacts our day-to-day lives is happening in your state house and is happening in your city council building, your city county buildings. And I think about, I'm in a super minority. My first year in session, I was able to get $20 million to help build our homeless shelter in town, right? That's tangible, that's right there, that happened, and that has an immediate impact on our community that we're helping to support people. Your city council folks, those are the ones that are making sure that you have your parks and your sidewalks and all of these things that help give you that quality of life when it seems like everything is raining down on us from the federal government, right? But what's really happening, in your day-to-day life, when you open your front door, you want to see that there's action that's happening there too. And so I think that part of what we have to do is run for office, absolutely, and run at all levels. We need people at school board and city council and in your state houses, and then of course, in our U.S. seats as well. But helping people understand that government is more than just about the person in the White House. I think we've got to get that message across.
I think the other piece, though, is there's a perception that things are happening that really aren't happening, right? And so what we see, for example, are the first part is the breaking of all sort of protocols and norms, and so the rule of law, if you will. And then we see in many of these cases the courts kind of rolling back those things once the challenges comes in. And so I think that's part of the messaging issue, right? There is the idea that there's been movement, progress, and delivery on some things where there really has not. There's been a move, right? But it's been so far outside the norms, the protocols, and the rule of law that it's actually been reversed. But to your point, from a messaging perspective, right, the idea is that it happened already, right? And there's nobody coming and say, hey, that really never happened. Let me clarify and clean up what you think just occurred.
I just want to put one fine point on what my soror senator said about running for office. I just want to reiterate that for everybody in my position across the country. Please run for office and run at the local level. You can do it. You are qualified. I promise you are. Just know, present company excluded, there's not always the best and brightest up at the State House. Our current state treasurer, who has lost, stole, found, whatever, $1.8 billion is an exterminator. Okay? So I want y'all to just let that sink in your head. Please run for office.
This will be our last comment.
No, I agree. Please run for office. And you brought up something that I believe is part of the reason why 50% of the country doesn't vote. And some people might disagree with me on this, but I actually believe as a Democrat that one of our biggest problem isn't just a communications issue. Because when you say that, what you're saying is that we're doing everything right, but not enough people are hearing about it. I think we also have a doing problem. And a big part of this is what we see as possible and what we actually do. And the problem is we can do a lot of good things. And the way I like to explain it to people is that when the economy is rigged, so that in a way, no matter what, those at the very top always get the most, and those in the middle and the bottom get the least. Even when the economy grows on paper, it's growing the way it's been rigged, which means no one feels it. That's why people got so frustrated at the end of the Biden administration. Such good work was done to get out of the pandemic. Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. The economy was growing. But if you asked working people, do you feel it? They'd say no. And a lot of people were trying to respond by saying, but the paper says that the economy is growing. Both things are true. It was growing, but this economy is rigged. So it don't matter when it grows, it's growing the way it's been stacked. And that's the key issues. People are getting so desperate. The wealth inequality is so bad. It's harder than ever for working people. Talk to anybody who runs a food bank 20 years ago. Who's in line? People in abject poverty and people who are homeless. Who's in line now? Mom and dad in the minivan, both have a job. They got a house, they have a mortgage. The salary that paid for everything 10 years ago doesn't scratch the surface now. That's what it looks like to go from the middle class to the working poor. And a lot of times in politics, when people talk about the working class, they forget that most black people are working class. This is a black America issue too. And I hone in on this because if we don't wake up to the fact that we need big, bold, transformational change, we gotta stop ostracizing people who are unafraid to step up and say we need to do big things. Because if we don't do those big things, we will continue to lose. And We have to run on it, win on it, and what's the most important part? Do it. And show people that government can work for them. And I think you're bringing up a really important thing. And, sorry, I know we're out of time, but because we're talking about municipal government, this is really important in municipal government as well. I'm very involved in my local elections, endorsing people, donating, knocking doors for them. We do year-round organizing. The reason why is, look, some of the most expensive cities in this country are run by Democrats, okay? It's something we have to contend with and understand that we might have to see our jobs a little differently. And what I've learned from speaking with a lot of folks in municipal government and seeing things is there's two types of people. There's people who see that their job is about keeping the trains running on track, keeping the operation moving. And there's people who say, we gotta do that, but we also have to question the operation and see how we're going to fundamentally change the city that we live in, so that way it is easier for working people to live this dream that we've all been sold. So yes, run for office, but run for office to be an agent of bold, transformational change. If you're going to run it the way it's always been run, don't do it. All right?
Absolutely. Well, this has been an absolutely amazing panel. Before we end, just a reminder that we do have our community defense blueprint. So I want you all to when you go to your next chapter meeting, I want you to bring this document. When you go to your next social action committee meeting, bring this document and start thinking about what is the mobilization plan? How are we going to save our democracy? How are we going to use data? How are we going to think about our judicial defense? How are we going to think about supporting more African Americans to run for office? So let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank you so much. So thank you all and have a great evening.
He had a question, but he kind of gave it to her.
Oh, well, we're supposed to stop 5 minutes ago. Can we continue? Okay. I don't. Okay.
Young man.
Okay.
My name is Jalen Wilson. I serve as a Southwestern Second Vice Director. With the rollback of DEI, my campus has become a lot tighter and more strict regarding events and posts that our D9 organizations can put out on social media. What are ways that Sigmas and Zetas specifically can mobilize the Black communities on our campuses, especially on PWI campuses, without sparking up any issues or misunderstandings that can be detriment to our chapters?
That's an important question. And so here's what I would say is that they're protecting you. They're protecting you all by not having you post everything on social, because they don't want everyone to know where you're going to be, why you're going to be gathering, and also what we put on the internet stays forever. And so they're also protecting your ability to get a job in the future. So that's important. That being said, you all still have to gather and you still have to do the work, and we still have to build community and opportunities for joy, because joy is a critically important act of resistance. And so one thing is that we have a group in our city that they just call it a poetry reading. That's not what happens there, but that's what they call it. And everybody who knows what's happening. So you all can be really creative about what you're doing. You also have other ways to get in touch with each other than putting it out on socials, right? You got your, Signal. I mean, I would use something that's, private. But you've got other ways of getting a message out. But start a poetry reading.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to this amazing event, Real Talk. Yes. So I want to take this opportunity before you all leave to thank some important people who helped bring and put this event together. This amazing Real Talk event. Before I had the opportunity to get into this seat, there were some people working behind the scenes. I want to make sure I acknowledge them. Brother Stephen Miller Pitts, I want to thank you for your work and putting forth this particular effort. I want to thank you to Brother Steve Ballard, Brother Dr. Cockrell, and I also want to thank my sisters of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Cheryl Pentington Graves and Yasmin Beckram. Thank you all very much. Now we're going to proceed over to the Legacy of Leaders reception next door in salons B and C. Thank you very much.